And let me know when you start sending people in so that I can start.
Okay.
I guess I can't see, whoops. Okay, now I see.
I don't think I actually have to let them in because they're already here.
All right, so
far we have 34 attendees. You should have like hold music.
no, we'll start. So hello everyone. For those of you who are joining a little bit earlier, we're just waiting for people to log on and connect, and we will get started pretty quickly. So bear with us while we try to get everyone in.
Liliana, you're showing up as me.
I'm showing up as you. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can change my.
I can do it.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Sorry. So this feels a little bit like listening to popcorn, you know, so once it starts slowing down, then we know we should get started.
Yeah. How many did she said there were like over 100 people. We're at 44 right now.
I was gonna say, but the first part is an introduction. So why don't we just get started? And that way people won't miss too much, and those who arrived. All right, so welcome everyone who's joining us at this Special Education 101 COVID-19 edition. I'm Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa, and we have Ariel Peters, hello, and Romy Peik, who are going to be doing this presentation today. Ariel and I are going to be forward-facing and we'll be speaking, and you will be chatting through the question and answer box with Romy. So if you have any questions that may come up during the presentation, or if you have thoughts that you came in with ahead of the presentation, please share them with us in the chat, in the Q&A. The chat box is closed right now, so that's really your way of communicating with us. Also, if you read the question and answer feature, there may be a question that another parent asks, and if you find that question interesting, you can vote that question up so that we prioritize it. We may not get to all the questions that you ask, but we will try. Also know that we have been conducting a number of presentations in the last few weeks with the understanding that things are changing pretty much every day. So we will try to give you as much information as we are able to, as quickly, as accurately as we can, but know that it might change tomorrow, which is why we have tons of contact information for you to reach us. There may be a problem right now with the Q&A. We're going to be troubleshooting and figuring out what's happening. If it continues to not work, then we will open the chat box for you to then be able to use it. I think that's a fair way to solve it, right? All right, let's get started once my computer starts working too. So today we're going to be talking about special education during this time, and we'll have a brief introduction and a few polls to see who's here. Throughout the presentation, we will also conduct a few polls. First, we'll talk about a special education overview, and then remote learning plans, and finally, how to solve problems in this time frame. So for those of you who are not aware who we are, it looks
poll number 1, sorry.
Question and answer is working. Are you able to reach it?
No.
Okay, so.
Here, I'm gonna launch this poll so that you guys can do this in the meantime while I try and figure out why I can't open my Q&A.
Okay. So for those of you who are attending, please just click on this poll to let us know who you are. If you're a student, a parent, an educator, or another type of professional. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna move this to the side.
So I don't know.
Come again?
Nothing. I just, for some reason, it's still not working.
Okay, I'll try to figure it out too later on. So Advocates for Children is an independent agency. We protect the rights of all New York City students. We are not the education rights of all New York City students. We are not affiliated with the Department of Education. We are truly independent. We offer a number of services, and the ones that you're going to see most frequently are a helpline. It's a free line that is working remotely. We are taking calls daily, Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4 in the afternoon. You can also email us at info@advocatesforchildren.org. The address we'll give you at the end. We have tons of guides and resources on our websites, and when you get a copy of this presentation tomorrow in our follow-up email, you'll be able to click on that blue link. All the blue links are live, so you'll be able to access this information directly. But we have tons of information on our website in multiple languages. We offer free workshops, free trainings, and now all virtual trainings through 2020, and free legal services to families who have low income. Shall we go to the next slide, or do you have another
You guys
poll?
want to see the results of the poll?
I'd love to see the results of the poll. So who's with us today?
We have
Ooh,
no students, about 14 parents, 20 educators, and about an equal number of parents, educators, and other professionals.
perfect. And I'm sure some of you have multiple roles, parents and educator, parents and professionals. So welcome all. Thank you for being here. I wanted to let you know that we have a lot of updated information about what the Department of Education is planning on doing during this crisis. That blue link, which I'm going to highlight here, takes you to our website, which has right there information about COVID-19, the most recent updates that we've been able to garner. Okay. We have another poll, Romy.
Oh. So our next poll is, what are your plans for the fall?
So what are your plans for the fall? All remote learning, blended learning, and I'm losing my mind, I can't decide. I can't vote. But
Okay.
if I were to vote, I would tell you that I'm losing my mind. I can't decide. Let's give it a second. And Romy, when you have a critical mass, let us know how we did.
Okay, people are still coming in, but I'm just going to end the poll because we'd like to move on. And it seems fairly close.
Ah, that sounds about right. Thank you for sharing. All right. So I think Ariel, you're on.
Great. So we're going to start today with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is the federal law that protects children with disabilities through the age of 21. The law, which is also known as the IDEA, is rather complex, but what it boils down to is this. Children with disabilities have the right to a free, appropriate public education, also known as a FAPE, in their least restrictive environment, also known as LRE. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of these things. Starting with FAPE. FAPE, as I said earlier, is a free, appropriate public education. And that means that it's tailored to the needs of the individual child. The saying goes that you are entitled to a Chevy, not a Cadillac. And what that means is that school districts are not required to provide children with disabilities with every possible support or service that might benefit them. However, they are required to provide children with disabilities with an appropriate education. A broken bicycle is not acceptable. The goal is meaningful progress so that the child can achieve their potential. FAPE should take place in a child's least restrictive environment. What that means is that a child with disabilities should be educated alongside their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. The goal is inclusion. LRE does not mean that children with disabilities receive fewer supports and services than they need. It does mean that the supports and services should come as close to possible as to a general education setting. And we'll talk more about the continuum of services later in this presentation. Under the IDEA, to receive special education services, a child's school performance must be adversely affected in one of the following 13 disability categories. These classifications are not diagnoses. Depending on a child's disability, more than one classification may be appropriate, but there will be only one classification listed on the IEP. For preschool students, the classification is simply preschool student with a disability. And we aren't going to talk much about preschool today, but we do have a webinar about preschool special education services that you can find on our YouTube channel. Here are some of the supports and services that are available to children with disabilities. We'll start with assistive technology, or AT. You'll see that there are a lot of abbreviations in the special education world. Assistive technology could include a device like an iPad, or even software like text-to-speech software that reads a book aloud to a student with a visual impairment, for example. Paraprofessionals may accompany a student with behavioral or health needs. And then related services is an umbrella category that includes counseling, nursing, occupational and physical therapies, also known as OT and PT, and speech language therapy, and more. These services help a child with disabilities benefit from special education services. These services are challenging to provide remotely, as I'm sure some of you have seen. At this point, most parents have received a related services survey to complete, but things are obviously a work in progress. And down at the bottom, we have special education teacher support services, also known as SETs. SETs can be offered in the classroom or in a separate location. They can be one-on-one or in a small group. The teacher works with the student or students on academic goals to help the student progress.
And now I'm on. So when we're talking about special education, we're talking about two things. We're talking about a program, a type of service that's been recommended, and we're also talking about placement, where the service is going to be recommended. The Department of Education offers a continuum of services that goes from the least restrictive, which is general education with supports and services. It's where you are the closest to your typically developing student to be able to implement that least restrictive environment cornerstone of the special education law. When you're talking about the continuum of services, you go from least restrictive to more restrictive, further away from the general education environment. In New York City, that looks like after general education, the next most restrictive setting is integrated co-teaching, or ICT, which is a hybrid general education, special education classroom where you will have a maximum of 25 children in the classroom being co-taught by two teachers, one general, one special education teacher. And there will be a group of students within that classroom, no more than 12, that will have an IEP that recommends an integrated co-teaching class or other special education services. More restrictive than that, you have within the community school, your corner school, self-contained classrooms that will only have children who are recommended to attend a smaller classroom setting. The most typical ratios that you're going to see are 12 children plus one teacher plus one paraprofessional. When you're looking at those ratios, the first number is always the number of children, the second number, the number of teachers present, and then the last number, if there is one, the number of paraprofessionals or school aides are assigned to help the students in that entire classroom. The more children in the classroom, the less restrictive it's going to be, because there's going to be less needs for supports and structures. The smaller the number of children in the classroom and the higher the number of adults, then you have a classroom that requires a lot more assistance, children who are in greater needs of supports. More restrictive than your special class in a community school, you will find specialized classrooms in an all specialized school. Often this is known as district, sorry, I skipped one part, which is District 75 inclusion. Skip that part and let's just rewind a second. And that is that District 75 is an all special education department within the Department of Education that runs specialized supports all around the 5 boroughs of New York City. Within a community school, you might have what's called District 75 inclusion programs, which is when the District 75 runs a specialized program that is included within a general education setting. So you might find a smaller general education classroom that has 1 or 2 students that require additional supports to be in that classroom with wraparound District 75 settings. More restrictive than that is now you are removed from the community school and you go into a specialized class in a specialized school, a District 75 school. The difference between a community school and a District 75 school is that District 75 schools could be located anywhere in New York City. It doesn't have to be limited to your specific community. And all of the classrooms in a District 75 school are self-contained classrooms. You're not going to find integrated co-teaching, and you're not going to find general education classrooms in that smaller District 75 schools. Now, the District 75 school is more likely than not going to be located inside another community school so that you have interaction with typically developing peers as well as the specialized supports and services that a child might need. And if you look at the ratios here, you see how it's getting more restrictive because you have a smaller number of children and a higher number of adults for the most part. So 12 to 1-to-1s, 8 to 1-to-1s, 6 to 1-to-1s, etc. More restrictive than that, we're talking about state-approved non-public schools. So when the Department of Education does not have the services that a child might need to be able to make progress, they may recommend a state-approved private school to serve that child. And that is considered to be more restrictive because not only are you away from the general education setting and environment, you would be going into a specialized day program, for example, but you're also away from your community. The school may be located somewhere else, further from your borough, your neighborhood, and even all New York City. More restrictive than that would be a residential placement where a child would go live and receive services. The most restrictive setting that is found within the Department of Education's menu of services, the Continuum of Services, is home instruction. Home instruction is when a child is unable to attend school because of a health or another condition for even a portion of the day. This is different than homeschooling because in home instruction, the Department of Education will offer supports while the child is at home pending their ability to return to school. With homeschooling, you create your own program that is then approved by the Department of Education, but it is not a special education program like home instruction would be. So far, so good? This is your time for questions. So if all of that made sense, then you don't have to ask any questions. But let's take a look at questions that may have popped up. Romy, do you have anything that you want to highlight?
I just want, it seems like it's working. Sorry, the Q&A is still not working for me. So people have been entering questions in on the chat, which is great. I'm trying to keep up. If I haven't answered you, it's either because it's too detailed of a question and we can respond to it later, or it's just coming up in the presentation and it will be answered later. But just generally speaking, we are not offering a certificate for this webinar. I think that question came up a couple times. We will also be providing the slides and you'll have access to a recording of this after it's over.
All right, and then I see a question here. It says regarding ICT, I mentioned that 12 students with an IEPs. If a student has an ICT math, but not ICT ELA, does this student count towards the 12 students in an ICT ELA class? Technically, any student that has an IEP counts towards the special education portion of the ICT. Although in practice, it looks sometimes like only students with ICTs on their IEPs, it's a lot of acronyms here, are counted, but technically it should be any child that has an IEP would count towards that total. In practice, it really is the student who is recommended for an ICT. I hope that's clear. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay. Oh, you had answered that one already. All right, so do you have a poll for us?
I don't think so, not here.
All right, so then let's carry on with the special education process. So special education can seem like a very complex system, but it has a very basic, predictable process that starts with pre-referral intervention services. So if your child were at school and they were experiencing difficulties in any area of development, learning, physical, etc., the Department of Education would then at that point try to implement pre-referral services, so services to avoid a referral to special education evaluation, just to address your child's needs, to support them, and to see if they work in helping them make progress. After that, either or at any given point, you as a parent have the right to make a referral, which is a request for an opening of a special education case or an action taken with a special education program. The school would have to take extra steps, but the first step would be a referral. Now, we'll talk a little bit about referral. Remember this part, the referral must always be done in writing. If you request an evaluation or if you request an IEP meeting verbally, it is not recorded anywhere. There is a requirement for the referral to be done in writing. A referral can be done in any language as long as it's in writing. Okay. After referral, if there is a requirement for another evaluation, for new evaluations and your consent, and it's beyond 3 years, the Department of Education will request your consent for evaluations. Then the request has to be done in writing. Again, it has to be voluntary, so no one can force you into consenting to a special education evaluation. And all that you're doing is allowing the Department of Education to evaluate your child in the areas where there is a suspicion of a disability. That is what consent means. After consent, the evaluation process begins. And evaluations are the tests that are done to determine what needs a child may have, what are their strengths, where are the areas of growth, where there may be a gap, so that services then can be offered. And then finally, the development of the IEP, which we will talk plenty about later, and the arrangement of placement and services. The steps are always going to be the same. So if you're at the point of the IEP of requesting an evaluation, for example, and consent is in the books, you know the evaluation is going to come after without the need for consent. And if you just want an IEP meeting and you just and you made a request for an IEP meeting and all evaluations are in, then you just have to put it in your calendar that the next step is the IEP meeting. Okay. Now, to refer a child for a special education evaluation in writing, at this point, you can email the principal, and we meant to spell this out, or the Committee on Special Education. We will email tomorrow a special education guide. At the very end of the guide, you will find the contact information for the Committees on Special Education, and later on, we will also have a link to where you can find contact information. But you may email either the principal, which is the school, or the Committee on Special Education, which is a department within the Department of Education that offers and controls special education services, to begin the process or to continue the process, to request additional evaluations, to request an IEP meeting, etc. You can also email specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov or call 311 for additional information. Remember, you cannot make a referral orally. It has to be done in writing. Okay? Now, during this time, you may see remote evaluations. Can they be done? Evaluations can be done on a case-by-case basis remotely. Some evaluations will not be able to be done remotely, and that's okay. Some in-person evaluations are taking place right now, but assuming that there'll be a closing in the future, it is possible to then postpone those evaluations until a time when it is safe to return to in-person evaluations. So right now there are in-person, remote evaluations are available if you feel safer doing those on a case-by-case basis. Now, an IEP meeting can be held with current information, but if you don't have all the information you need or the information is not current, another IEP meeting must follow once assessments are completed. Now, we'll talk a little bit about this in just a second. There are timelines associated with the special education process. In general, it is 60 school days from the time of consent to the time that services are arranged and placement is arranged. During school closing, the timelines for evaluations are not paused, but the timelines for arranging services are. So while schools were closed, those days do not count towards the time frame for compliance for placement. But during that time, the Department of Education still had to conduct evaluations. They still had to hold IEP meetings. They still had to do other things. They just were excused, if you will, for the time being from offering and arranging placements. Okay. And these are live links. You can look at those later on if you'd like. Let's go back to evaluations for a second. What should an evaluation include? Students have to be tested in all areas of suspected disability. So this means a complete evaluation. It includes a social history, a psychoeducational evaluation, classroom observation, physical, any other areas of concern, and vocational testing, beginning in middle school, but certainly after the age of 14. Now, when we talk about all areas of suspected disability, we mean all areas of suspected disability. So if the Department of Education conducted a battery of tests, but you, through the grapevine, heard about some other child having a condition that sounds a lot like yours, and you say, I think that might be right. I suspect that my child may have that specific disability. That is enough for you to, in writing, say, hey, Department of Education, my friend told me about this evaluation, and I think that my child would benefit from it because I suspect that he or she has this specific disability. Or you heard it on TV, or you heard it somewhere else, and you're wondering, that sounds about right. As long as you suspect that your child has a disability and that an evaluation may be able to tease that out, that's all you need to request an evaluation. Evaluations conducted through the Department of Education have to be done for free. No, at no point should a Department of Education employee tell you, we don't conduct such and such evaluation. You have to go and get it on your own. Instead, what they should be telling you is like, wow, that sounds like a different evaluation. We'll figure it out. We'll contract it out. We'll find somebody to do it, and they have to do it within that time frame. So I don't ever want to hear anybody calling us from this group to tell us that you were told to go get a private evaluation because they don't do a psychoeducational, they don't do a neuropsychological, they don't do whatever other evaluation you need for your child, because that's a requirement. What's happening now for evaluations? I like these graphics, but I also like just to present them all at once. So right now, because schools are not exactly the way that we're used to, pre-referral interventions have to be used creatively. So while you're at home, yes, the Department of Education should be offering interventions to try to support a child who may be in need of a referral to a special education evaluation through softwares, through different programming, through interventions offered by teachers that have been assigned to do so, in other ways that may work for the child. IEP meetings will be held with available information, so it might be an imperfect IEP meeting, but know that if you do not have all the information needed, an IEP meeting will have to be rescheduled afterwards to complete and update the information. Now, having said a little bit about this, private remote evaluations cannot be rejected. If you have a remote evaluation that you did privately and you'd like for that to be used in the creation of an IEP, that should be used. Evaluations have taken place and will continue to take place. So if you're told no evaluations will take place until schools reopen, that is not true. Evaluations can take place and have been taking place. So that is false. And you have the right to make a request for new evaluations, for new IEPs, for a different placement, whatever request you need to make during this time. You should never be asked to withdraw your request for any of the pieces that you need for your child to be able to get an appropriate education. Now, a few reminders. The IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, continues to apply even during this crisis. For the most part, you'll find the very same things now as hopefully when this crisis is over. Consent must be written, voluntary, and informed. You must have those evaluations within 60 calendar days of consent now. It's 3 school days, now it's calendar days. Remember, there is a pause for placement and arrangement of services while schools were ordered to be closed by executive action in New York. You can ask for evaluations at any time, and you have the right to free evaluations in all areas of suspected disability. Complications. Some evaluations are tough to complete remotely. So for those, while there is an opportunity to conduct in-person evaluations, you can. If it comes to the point that we are unable to do so, again, then that request can come in, and those complications will exist, but they will get resolved eventually. Okay. Do we have another poll?
Yes, we do. Sorry. I'm trying to answer all the questions, but we're about to do the IEP section, right? So,
Yes.
yes, okay. So our question for you is, have you ever participated in an IEP meeting? I put not sure in there just because sometimes the DOE does hold meetings without telling you that it's an IEP meeting. And so, but nobody has clicked that yet. Okay. A lot of people have. I'm going to close the poll. And we have about 70% of the people here have, and about 30% have not.
Okay. And Mimi, did you have any questions that you thought needed to be taken to the floor, or are we good to continue?
No, I don't think so. I think hopefully I've been covering them as they pop up.
Okay, great. So a lot of you know about IEPs, and now Ariel, take it away.
So this will be review for many of you, but just so you know, an IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. It is an instructional plan that is, as the name would imply, individualized to meet the needs of a student with disabilities. A committee called an IEP team creates the IEP. These meetings usually occur in person, but right now they are occurring over the phone. And an IEP is a legally binding document. In a sense, it is like a contract. If a service is on the IEP, then the DOE is required to provide it. They do not expire, but IEPs should be updated every year. And at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the phone number and email address for contacting the DOE's Special Education Office.
Second, there you go.
Parents are the most important part of the IEP team. They know their child best, and they have a right to be at the meeting. Also at the meeting are at least one general education teacher and at least one special education teacher. They should know the student. That doesn't always happen, but they really should know the student if they're going to be at the meeting. A psychologist is typically in attendance. They act as the chairperson of the meeting, and they should be there if there are new evaluations to discuss. The district representative must also be at the IEP meeting, but the teachers and the psychologists can fulfill this requirement. The student is invited to the meeting starting at age 15 and may participate if appropriate. And then the parent also has the option to bring other persons to the meeting, for example, a family member or an advocate. And if the parent does not speak English, then there must be an interpreter at the meeting. So we have a poll.
We can't hear you, Rumi.
Sorry. The poll, what's the poll? This is the poll, I believe. True or false? Is that what it says on the slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and this goes to a question that was just asked. True or false? You may request an IEP meeting at any time.
And while we're waiting, there are a couple of questions that I think they needed some answers still, which is, one was, can you request an evaluation in the Department if I suspect my child of needing a speech evaluation, I can request it and the Department of Education cannot deny it? Correct. If you suspect your child has a need for a speech evaluation, the Department of Education must conduct it. And the difference in process when one refers to the school versus the district is the same. It's the Department of Education is the Department of Education. So request to the school, request to the district, it should function in the same way. Romy, your poll.
Yay, so most of you answered correctly. A parent may request an IEP meeting at any time.
Ariel, you are on. And actually, add to that, which is that the IEP meeting typically happens once a year, but if you want to change, something happens, you have new evaluations, you need different, you want to tweak it, you can make a request for an IEP meeting at any given point. There is no set number, there's no limit to the number of IEP meetings. You can request, so they'll be reasonable. Ariel, you're on.
Great. So the IEP team meets to discuss the student's strengths, interests, needs, and goals, and consider the results of recent evaluations, and then make appropriate recommendations in light of a student's needs. After the meeting, the IEP is finalized, and the finalized IEP should include the student's current levels, the teacher reports, and of course the parents report. The IEP also includes some IEP history. The idea is the IEP team does not start over every year. It is a document that's continually evolving. And keep in mind that the information on the IEP should be current, even if the evaluations are unfinished due to the shutdown. So here are some advocacy tips. You should call us if the school refuses to conduct an IEP meeting, if the school will not recommend any services until school's reopened, or until evaluations are conducted, or if the school says it cannot consider any changes to an IEP until schools reopen or until evaluations are conducted. So please give us a call if this is something that's happening to you.
Oh, guess I'm on. Hi. All right, and I'll add to what Ariel just said, and that is that if you have any questions, you should always feel free to give us a call, but especially when those things are happening. We wanted to talk now about remote learning plans versus IEPs. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is that for those of you who may be familiar with a remote learning plan, it is a Department of Education document that adapted the IEP for a new reality. It may have a new name when the school year begins. So what we now know as Special Education Remote Learning Plan, a sample of which is on your screen, may look different, may have a different name, but in essence, it should tell you what you should expect your child to receive while receiving remote instruction. In this particular one, I'll go through it in just a minute, but before we get into that, if you know the remote learning plan or whatever it is called, the document that reflects your child's program during remote instruction is something that is supposed to be done in consultation with you. So if you haven't received one for the summer and you don't know what I'm talking about, please be on the lookout for some sort of document at the beginning of the school year. If you do not receive one and you're planning on doing some remote instruction, please request it from the school. If you have input and you want some changes onto it, contact the service provider, the teacher, and the school to then start tweaking and changing some of it. It does have to be based on the IEP. It may not include all the services that are on the IEP. It is not a substitute for the IEP. It is not a waiver for the IEP. It is simply a description of a program that your child is going to receive remotely. Now, if you know what you need at home, ask for it early. If you don't know what you want, take your time to figure it out. Ask tons of questions now. How are things going to be offered? When are things going to be offered? What platforms are going to be used? What time frames do you need for me to be able to ask for changes? What scheduling do you have available? The Department of Education is changing their guidance pretty much daily. And around this time, when they're trying to figure out how services are going to be provided for the year, it's going to be changing almost minute by minute, really. So if you hear some information, don't just accept the information, verify it. It may change or it may be outdated, but just ask tons of questions and reach out to us. Now, this remote learning plan that we're looking at has a number of important parts. All right. It has student information, so it will tell you some important things, such as your English language learner status, whether or not you need language access supports, what your disability classification is, whether you require assistive technology if you have it, if you need it, and if you don't have it at home. This part is important because if you need certain things to be able to participate fully in school, such as assistive technology, the document should accurately reflect the need. And if you don't have it and you need it, this is something that you need to request right away. The remote learning plan will have a section like this, where it tells you what classes you're going to receive, how often, how many minutes, and what language, what teletherapies you're going to receive, what additional supports. In this case, you see, maybe follow my cursor, ICT office hours, so integrated co-teaching support services, and then also the technology that's going to be available in the specific device that's assigned to the student. So in this case, Google Classroom is going to be available in every subject with video conferencing, ebooks, audio, video materials in an ongoing manner. It is supposed to be individualized per child. So if your child has a need for speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling services, that should go in here. If any of these services cannot be offered remotely because it doesn't work for your child, then you can make a request for in-person services early, and that is the survey that Ariel had mentioned earlier in the presentation. If in-person services are not available or you're unable to access the remote therapies as your child requires them, then there is a way later to problem solve and maybe get related services authorization letters, or in the future recuperate the services that you were unable to get. But for the time being, focus on trying to create a remote learning plan, a program, whatever it is called, that reflects your child's actual needs while remote learning. So far, so good? It's hard to do online because I can't see your faces to know how confused you are. And I'm hoping that this makes sense. If not, I hope to see a lot more questions than what are coming up. During COVID, services, for the most part, will be remote. We are seeing, of course, that there's going to be blended programming and some instruction that will be held in person and live, but there will be remote services. So this is a reality for the time being, that we may go all remote again, or we may slowly ease back into school, but just get used to the idea that there will be a lot of remote services. For the remote plan, whatever it is called, the provider should reach out to you to make arrangements. But if you know your provider, you like your provider, reach out to them first. Make sure that you snap them up and secure them for the provision of services at home. A real interesting thing about remote learning plans is that you may be able to access service providers that you had no access to before because they were too far away from you. So if you have a real good provider that you always pined for and you wanted to work with, maybe this is your chance. As long as they can be used, they receive Department of Education funding. And you must have the chance to provide input about the remote learning plan. This is not something that is given down to you. This is something that you participate in creating so that it is workable and usable for you and for your child. Now, new placements. Now, we talked about, obviously, this is a very strange time. And there is that pause in the timeline for offering placements, but you're still entitled to a placement before the start of school. So even if there is this pause, if you have not received a placement or you're anticipating one, you should be able to get one before the start of the new year. If you are not satisfied with the placement that your child has right now in your brick and mortar school, you can still state that it is not an appropriate placement and you would like a new placement. That is still an option. You can switch schools. So a lot of kids are switching schools right now from middle school to high school. So this is happening. The Department of Education will send a school location letter that informs you the proposed placement for your child. This school location letter is a letter for mostly self-contained classrooms. It will tell you where in the Department of Education there is a classroom that is able to implement the IEP. And you have the right to request information about this proposed placement so that you can verify whether or not that placement will be able to offer the services listed on the IEP. You can do so by calling the number that's on the letter, and by asking additional information. We can give you some guidance later on as to what information you could be able to ask for. A new school will reach out to you with a contact number, but if you do not find the contact number, we can help. There are some places where we can help you locate who to reach out to, or some general contacts for you to start your search. And if the schools are not open for visits, you can still talk with the staff there and ask questions. Now, the Department of Education still has 60 calendar days from your consent to evaluate, or from the time that you make a request for an evaluation or for an opening of a case, to have the evaluations to the extent possible, remotely or in person, depending on the situation. And to hold the IEP meeting, please remember that that IEP meeting could be held with imperfect information. And you still have a right to placement before the start of the school year. If you need a placement now, the Department of Education should find one as soon as possible. So if right now you don't have a placement, you don't have a school, you're entitled to one. Now, finally, on this portion, if no provider is available for services, either because you need in-person services and they're not available, or because the scheduling doesn't work and you don't have a provider available for the time that you need the service, or for any other reason, no provider is available, you are entitled to a related services authorization letter, which is like a voucher for you to be able to locate a private vendor who takes Department of Education funding and offer the services to your child following the recommendations on the IEP. If no specialized classroom is available, so if you require a placement in a specialized classroom and you do not have a specialized classroom offered to you, a P1 letter, a Nickerson letter, which is like a voucher for you to go and find your own state-approved private school, may be appropriate. Now, I say this, in recent times it's been very difficult to obtain P1 letters, let alone because that time frame has been extended. So keep in mind that this is a possibility, but right now it's not a sure bet, as they say. Okay. I think this is Ariel, but before we go on, I actually wanted to see if there were questions that you wanted to bring to the floor, Romy, because I know this was a very heavy section. Or if you're good.
I think I've got this. There seem to be a lot of questions, though, maybe because there are a lot of teachers out there who are attending this webinar. So we are not offering a certificate for this webinar, and Advocates for Children is not a part of the Department of Education or of the New York State Education Department. So, you know, in terms of whether or not this information is available to the Department of Education, it absolutely is. They should all know about, you know, what's happening during COVID and remote learning. We're trying to keep up with what they're planning and bringing that to you. But as you guys probably know, it's changing by the day. So, but certainly if anyone from the DOE wants access to our webinar, we'd be happy to give it to them.
That's right. All right, Ariel. Looks like you're on.
All right, well, let's talk about what happens if you disagree with the DOE. You can pursue either informal or formal dispute resolution. Here we have the hierarchy for informal dispute resolution. We recommend going up the chain of command, starting with the school. You can talk to the parent coordinator or the principal. And then from there, going to the district superintendent's office. Your point people there are the family support coordinator or the district family advocate. And then you can go to the borough support organization. There you want to talk to the administrator of special education, also known as the AZ. And then from there, you can go to the central special education office. And here we have the phone number and the email address again for contacting them. And if you need the contact information for some of the other offices I've just mentioned, the superintendent or the borough support organization, you can visit the link at the bottom of the page where you'll find those contacts, the live link.
That one.
For formal dispute resolution, there are a number of options. The two most common and the two that we're going to talk about today are impartial hearings and mediation. So we'll start with impartial hearings over here on the right side of the slide. Impartial hearings are legal proceedings. They are like a trial. The impartial hearing officer is in charge and acts like a judge. He or she will come to a decision in the same way that a judge does. He or she will issue a written decision based on the witnesses and their testimony and the documents that are provided by the parties. They can order services, they can order reimbursement, and if you're a parent, you can go by yourself, or you can also have an attorney go with you or a skilled advocate. And then over here on the left, we have mediation. This is another way of doing things. It's a voluntary meeting. So what that means is that, you know, if you're a parent, you can go to the meeting and you can invite the DOE, but they're not required to attend, unlike with an impartial hearing where they are required to be there. And with mediation, the parties can work together toward a solution with a neutral third party, the mediator, facilitating. And the advantage to mediation is that parties can control the outcome. It's not up to the hearing officer, it's up to the individual parties to reach an agreement. So here are some advocacy tips during these strange times that we are living in right now. Pay attention to timelines. We've talked a lot about those today. And keep a list of contacts you've spoken with. You want to have a paper trail, but if you're talking to someone on the phone, make sure you take notes and get the person's name. Ask for copies and keep the copies of the IEP and the remote learning plan that you have, and keep track of the services your child is actually getting. It may or may not match up with what's on paper, but it's important to keep track of what the child is receiving on a day-to-day and a weekly basis. And then, you know, you can reach out to us for help. You can also reach out to the DOE for help. We've provided in this presentation the contact information for various offices, including the Central Special Education Office. So, you know, we're here for you, but we hope that you'll reach out to them as well. So we're wrapping up. Here are some reminders. Like I just said, if you need help, please ask. We are open. We are not physically in the office right now, as you can see, but we are open virtually and here to answer your questions. Things are changing very, very rapidly. You can check for updates on our website as well, and there's the live link for that. We have our helpline. Here's the number, 866-427-6033. It's toll free, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And our email address, info@advocatesforchildren.org, is another way that you can reach us. So I think we have our final poll.
And while I was looking at some questions, I'm going to take the one from Brenda. She's asking for a list of suggested services I could refer to request help for my children. For example, my son has trouble focusing and the school he was in is not able to suggest anything to help with that. He's in ICT. We did one of the first webinars that we did, and tomorrow you'll get a link to our YouTube channel. It's called Remote Learning 101. One of the slides has a list of some good places to start with ideas for things that you can implement at home and ask the school for. I'll try to see if I can include some information when this is sent tomorrow, so you can start looking at what may be helpful, but also speak with providers more than with the school to see what they would suggest and recommend to help with focusing, because that's a difficult one. Let's see.
There's no difference if you make a referral for an evaluation or IEP meeting through the school or through the district. It should be the same.
All right. And now our feedback. What was?
We're still waiting. I guess that will be more for us than for
them. Yeah. If you guys have any more questions, please fill the poll. It was helpful to us. But if you have any more questions, please share them. We'll be happy to answer them now.
Yeah, in the chat.
Chat.
And then you'll also have something in your email if you have anything to share with us that isn't shared here.
It says the submit button doesn't work.
Oh, that I can't help with.
Well, go ahead.
No, I can't help with that for that one person. It could be, you know, in the same way that my Q&A button decided to completely malfunction during this webinar, and it's still not working. I'm sorry about that. If you guys can actually, can you guys see any of the questions that were in the Q&A?
I can't. I try to log on.
Okay, I can actually, I think I need to make you into co-host, if you will.
All right, let me see. There's one question here. Is there a reason that all classes are not integrated? Well, some students need supports beyond what can be offered in an integrated setting. So it really is supposed to be individualized to a child's needs. Thank you. And so, I mean, that's the short version. It's just because everything is supposed to be need-driven with special education, there should not be a cookie-cutter approach. If a child needs additional supports and services and cannot be integrated into a less restrictive setting, then that is the setting that is the most supportive and the most appropriate for them. We will be having a lot more webinars in the future. You can see the ones that we've already recorded. There's tons of them. And oh, questions from the Q&A.
Can you see them now?
I can't see them.
Oh, is it, I made you guys co-hosts so that you would be able to
Let me see now.
get access to them.
I'm sorry now, but if you can read them, I'm happy to answer them.
I still can't, but if anyone wants to ask those questions in the chat.
Thank you. Edgardo just asked one certificate of participation. Yes, you can request a certificate of participation, but it is not a professional certificate. It does not confer any credit. But to the extent that you need a certificate of participation, yes, request it. And it looks really pretty too. Do you offer this training in Spanish? No, but if you liked it enough, we can conduct one in Spanish. That is not difficult at all. Hablamos español, lo hacemos en español. Solicítelo y le prometo que lo haremos. How do you request an iPad not for AT, just remote learning? My son is starting at his new school, so we returned the Chromebook. You did a good job there returning the Chromebook, yes. I think that's a really good question because there used to be an online survey where you could just submit a request for assistive technology, I don't know if that link is live anymore. I think I would answer that if you're going to a Department of Education school, you should contact the school to ask how that can be requested, because right now I don't know, maybe you guys do, if the link for requesting devices is still active.
Ari, we were just talking about that today. I do know that as of like when we recently had an email about this, so, and it was still open, and I want to say that email was from about a week ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it is still open. Let me see if I can find the link. No
Okay.
promises.
And thank you, Edgardo, for sharing the questions. That's very
We
helpful.
are expecting though that there, you know, as the school year is starting, that there are going to be a lot of families whose devices that they got from last year are no longer working, they're broken, you know, the connection. You can get tech assistance at the DOE by submitting a request, but they are not always quick. So to the extent that your school might be able to also help you with your device, I would, you know, ask anyone and everyone, because as of now, I think the DOE has not been that quick to handle the tech questions.
And about tech, we recently saw some information that suggested that to be able to use the Chromebooks from last year, you may have to reset some of the features. There is an instruction, there may be a few steps that you need to take to be able to access data through the Chromebooks. So also be on the lookout, make sure that those Chromebooks are working, that they can connect, that they have all the programs that they need, and start early to make sure that the school year, when it begins, you have everything ready for the student to start.
Yeah, I would add that, so some schools are giving out Chromebooks or laptops to students, which is great, but it's only great if the family has Wi-Fi access. So that's why the DOE was issuing iPads to families, because sometimes either the family is in an area where they don't have, where like, especially in low-income neighborhoods, there are areas where the cable companies don't cover that area and provide good Wi-Fi. So for that reason, the iPad is coming with a data plan where students should be able to access the internet without having Wi-Fi at home.
So for those of you who wanted the workshop in Spanish, you can email workshops@advocatesforchildren.org and say that you'd like the Special Education 101 workshop in Spanish, and you'll get information right away as to how to make that request. Remember, we're only doing virtual workshops through 2020, so you won't see us in person, but hopefully you'll see us online. And our workshops are always free. That's always a question I forget.
Can you type the email in the chat or repeat it again?
Right there, workshops@advocatesforchildren.org. Let me go to the next page so you can see also. You can text AFC alerts to 22828 to opt in for weekly updates. They are not only beautifully presented, they're also quite informative. And don't forget, we're open, our services are free, we speak your language. If you're working with families who need support, you can write to us, you can call us. We will absolutely try to offer as much information as we can. All right. The text in the chat, of course. Text. Getting to it. I think our time together is almost coming to an end. 95% of you seem to have enjoyed this presentation. We really, truly enjoyed presenting to you. So hopefully we'll see you in the future. We'll be hanging out for any last questions that you may have. But other than that, stay safe. Don't forget to wear your masks, wash your hands, and stay positive. This will end too.
Yeah, good luck with next month for all of us.
All right.
Okay, so people are starting to log off. Were you guys were not able to see the Q&A?
No, I still can't see it.
I can see it.
For one person that's going to need a certificate, email us if you need a certificate of attendance at webinars@advocacyforchildren.org. It should be fine. All right.
Okay, should I end the poll?
Yes.
Oh, 46 of 46 voted. Okay, so we got,
Yay.
oh, look at us.
So Romy, I would stop recording
Yeah.
and I'm gonna.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm just gonna do one last chat save.
Yeah, I'm doing it now too.
Okay.